All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for being here for our Data Makes a Difference webinar. We're going to be going over data strategy with our VP of Services, Kenny Mobley. Kenny, take it away.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate it. And hello, everybody that's joined the webinar today. I want to quickly take you through data strategy and talk a little bit about what data strategy is and why it might be useful to start thinking about that in your organization. And before we start, I'd like to give you just a little bit of brief information about Cresco International. We're a technology and business management consulting company, and we specialize in data science, machine learning, decision optimization, and we really pride ourselves on using small specialized teams. And we think that helps us deliver high quality outcomes for the clients that we have. So let's move right into the presentation. I call this data makes the difference because I believe data does make the difference, but what we have to do is find ways to harness that data and get the most value out of it. So I want to start with a little quote, and this is from Sherlock Holmes from The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. And he said, "Data, data, data," he cried impatiently. "I can't make bricks without clay." And what he's saying there is he needs facts, the foundational element of everything he's going to use to build his case, to build the story, and try to determine what's going on. And he's going to do that through a process to build the information necessary for him to help solve the case. And right now, there has never been more data and more consumers of data than at any time. We're living in a time, and if we have this webinar again next year, we'll be able to say this same thing because the amount of data will continually increase and the amount of people wanting to use the data will increase right along with that. And tools have made it even easier for people to use data. And so I think if we said this next year or 5 years from now, we would say the exact same thing. So we are living at a high watermark that will continue to get higher. And if we think about data and how it's transitioned over the years, it used to be a byproduct of a business activity. So it was something that was generated by a system. And it was perhaps used outside that system, but often not. But these days, it's really a driver of business decisions. So what many companies are doing is extracting or grabbing that data and then trying to use it in other processes in the organization to make the data more effective and useful to them. But although these rapid outcomes are a key to success, data handling really hasn't changed that much over the years that the data has moved from a byproduct to a driver. Data is being handled in largely the same way it has always been handled in a lot of organizations, and that's caused a lot of problems, or even if it isn't causing visible problems, it's reducing the effectiveness that could be being gathered from that data. So before we talk about what a data strategy is, let's talk a little bit about what it isn't. It isn't a set of policies. Policies aren't a data strategy. And it isn't a set of technologies. No matter what technology, no matter how fancy it is, that isn't really your data strategy. That's just the way the data is being manipulated or handled. And it isn't something like a data warehouse or another collection of data. While those are good and maybe part of a data strategy, having a data warehouse doesn't mean you have a data strategy. And if we really think about it, a data strategy isn't even really a strategy on its own. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. So what is it? What is a data strategy? It is the execution of a set of initiatives that support a broader business strategy. That's the key. These are initiatives that support your business strategy. So if you don't have a well-defined business strategy or don't know the priorities of the business, it'd be almost impossible to develop a data strategy. Here's a way to think about this. Is $1 of cost savings the same as $1 of revenue? And your initial inclination may be, well, sure, it's $1. And $1 saved or $1 earned could have the same effect. But the right answer is it depends. And so what does it depend on? It depends on your business strategy. If you're a new company and you're in a high growth stage, that dollar of revenue may be the most crucial dollar. But if you're in a time like during this pandemic, maybe things are leaner and you're trying to survive, that dollar of cost savings could be the most important to you. And different companies are in different modes at different times during the company's evolution. And so you have to understand that overall and be prepared for both, but you can set a data strategy around one or the other or a combination of both. And what that really is boiling down to is that your data strategy should support and reinforce your business strategy. It has to. And one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about all this, that while it's true that revenues may continue to grow without a data strategy, which is easily provable, there are many companies out there making all kinds of money that may not have well-defined data strategies. But really you should think of data itself and putting a strategy around it, because it's like competitive rocket fuel, which is used as an input to valuable business insights that your company may have. It's that extra addition of information that might be able to help you overcome your competitor. So even if you're able to earn money without it, you shouldn't ignore it, because you may be ignoring a very important part of your overall business. So let's talk a little bit about what a data strategy is. And I'll give you two definitions here. First, it is a comprehensive vision across your enterprise that sets the foundation to employ data-dependent capabilities. And that foundation is very important. In the first slide, we talked about the clay. You're starting somewhere with something, facts. And even when we design star schemas where all the data points are, we call those tables the fact tables, because that's where the facts are. But less formally, it is an agreed upon approach to determine which data an organization believes is important. So not only is it a comprehensive vision about what you're going to do with the data and the foundational things that will support all that, it's what data you think is important, and then treating that data the way that importance dictates it should be treated. So let's talk about a couple features here. I've said a couple times now that business outcomes are the key. You're doing things to support your business outcomes. So some features that may help support those business outcomes include things like innovation, the use of internal and external data, responsiveness to your business needs, and this may be things like providing self-service analytics to your consumers, being fiscally responsible through things like integration and reuse of data, being adaptable and flexible, having the ability to modify and test different models to help improve your insights, being focused on quality to ensure that the data that you're delivering is of high quality. You would do things like certified data and have other ways of letting the users know that they're using good data. And being transparent through things like business glossaries or data definitions that allow for a common vocabulary across the enterprise of what the data means, how it's calculated, and what it should be used for, so that if one person has a report that has net income for a particular time period and set of products, and another person in the organization uses that same metric, that they both come up with the same value. So one place you can start when you're thinking about data strategy is, where is your data? Where does it exist within the organization or outside the organization? And you can do it by looking at things like, what data do we have? What data don't we have? What data do we know about? and what data do we not know anything about. And if I were to put those in a matrix and divide it into quadrants, you'd come up with something like this. And what this is saying is the data that you have and know about, you may already be doing something with it, like putting in your data warehouse. But there's other data, like data you know about, but data you don't have, which could possibly be competitors' data. You see them using it, you know about it, but you don't have it. And the interesting one is the one in the lower left, which says we don't have it and we don't even know about it, which seems counterintuitive. But you can perhaps envision what this data might be. Perhaps you know something like you're a retailer and you know people walk in and out of your store. You don't have any data on it. You don't even know where that data might be, but you can envision maybe figuring out a way to capture that data. Or you may envision other competitors using things or coming up with ideas and thinking, wow, they must have done that with some kind of data. What kind of data could that be? So it's a way of completely thinking about the whole ecosystem of data that might affect your organization. And really you're understanding this so you can become data ready, so that you're ready to use the data in the way you need to use it. And either it's integration between systems and partners, either it's through analytics, either it's through internal reporting tools that you're going to use in the organization, but it's getting an idea on it so you can become data ready. So why have these data strategies at all? I mentioned earlier that plenty of companies are making plenty of money without having a data strategy. But there's a lot of good reasons to have a data strategy because it's supporting the things you're already doing. And as you can see on the slide we're looking at now, this is very familiar to people that have been in business. There's really two main reasons to keep a business going, and that's running the business or growing the business. So when you run the business, you do things like optimize and automate, use data for that. But when you grow the business, you're doing things like exploration, maybe doing some prediction of where you'll be later, or even figuring out ways to monetize the data. Google being one of the shining examples of monetizing data that they've collected. You want to do all this and have a data strategy so while you're running and growing, you can avoid things like duplicating data, having overlaps in processing and replicating work, doing things you don't need to be doing, making decisions off different sets of information because there's no clear certified answer to what you're asking. All of that can get solved through using a data strategy. So what are some drivers behind this data strategy? What makes you need a data strategy? One is the need to align your data and analytics capabilities to the needs of your business users so that you're giving them what they need to do the work they need to do. Another is driving toward digital transformation or the exploration of new business models. There's a lot of companies that have had to change their business models that have done so quite successfully, and data is very influential in helping them understand maybe what they could do that either builds upon what they currently do or shifts them into something totally new. Enabling compliance and mitigating risk. Compliance doesn't necessarily mean being compliant with the data you have and mitigating the risk of somebody coming in and stealing your data. I'm talking about compliance and risk throughout the organization. So perhaps you have to follow very restrictive safety measures from OSHA, and you need to report upon that. Data can help you understand what's happening, where you're having violations, where you've had incidents, how you can mitigate those incidents at certain points. So enabling compliance and mitigating risk is a very useful function for data that is very well served by a data strategy. And of course, becoming more resilient to future needs. You want to do this while eliminating operational cost, meaning that you can't just replace all your systems every time you have a future need. You can't start everything over every time something new comes up and changes the way you need to do business. And the more resilient you are, the more able you would be to fight off competitors that come in and disrupt. And two big examples of disruptive competitors where the markets they entered, the folks that were already there weren't very resilient, is Uber and Airbnb in transportation and hotels. And Airbnb and Uber became very successful because they grabbed a lot of data and knew how to use that data and used it against the incumbents that were already there. They were not as prepared as they needed to be resilient and fight off an attack like that from a company that was using data. And for those that have been around for quite a while in IT and the data side, you know that your pressure points are changing. Early on, all data work was IT driven. It was highly governed. You only saw the certified data. That was the only data that existed. It was used for things like monitoring and answering known questions, like how much did we sell yesterday? And it was based upon this idea that storage was very expensive, so it was limited. So often this data was summarized or transformed or in some way cut down from its original form in order to meet the limitations of data storage. But these days, almost all data is business driven. All data and analytics needs are business driven. There are many power users out there that get their own answers from directly interacting with the data. A lot of the data is non-certified because of the advent of things like data lakes, where a lot of data is being thrown into a central place prior to processing and it's being used for different reasons. A lot of new insights are being derived from data. So when we talked about known questions last time, it's not about how much did we sell yesterday, it's about figuring out what we might sell tomorrow that we don't even have yet, haven't sourced yet. And almost any data can be used. The proliferation of desktop tools have allowed people to take different files from different places, public data, data from spreadsheets, and munge it together on their own and do whatever they need to with it to derive different insights. Because, as we all know now storage has gotten much, much cheaper, and so it's very abundant. But that just means there's a lot of data. And I mentioned in the beginning, hey, there's more data now than there ever has been, and there will be more in the future. There's lots of data. How do you make sense of all of it? How do you control it? How do you understand it? So what are some benefits of a data strategy? Some direct benefits. Let me throw a few up here right now. And one thing you may notice about all of these benefits are they're all benefits to your business. There's no benefits on here about the data. It's not like one benefit is you'll use 3 less bytes or it will run at this speed when it's processing. No, these are business benefits. It's things like increasing sales and customer loyalty, reducing your risk, identifying patterns that may lead you to other decisions, improving competitiveness. Those are the benefits of having a data strategy, because a data strategy would underpin all of this to make sure that you're making the right decisions in these areas. Let me give you a quick example. I worked for many years in the data team at GameStop before I came to Cresco, and one of the transformative things we went through while I was there was the development of a data strategy, which eventually led to an entirely new data architecture and an entirely new set of technologies that you were used to serve and collect and transform that data. So originally, there were multiple data sources from different systems. And like many companies, it had off-the-shelf products, homegrown systems, all collecting data. There was a data warehouse, but depending on if it were e-commerce or the stores or international, it was all in different areas. There was marginal data quality. There were some things that were going on to help data quality, but overall, it would probably be marginal to low. It was almost exclusively controlled by IT. So if a user had a request, they requested it from IT. And given the technologies and the way it was set up, there were many issues with large data sets, things like click analytics off the website that produced a lot of data in terms of volume and its complexity. It was very difficult. So we did a little data strategy over a couple years, and we were able to do a lot of different things to help that. We developed a full end-to-end data lake to data warehouse process that brought together all of the data sources. We improved the data quality itself through things that I've talked about throughout other slides in this webinar, things like a agreed upon business glossary, well-defined definitions in the data, very transparent layer for the users to go to where everything was described very well. A lot of different processes in place as the data moved through different areas of the data lake and the data warehouse. So data quality was greatly improved. And the data was democratized, which means it was given to the users to be used by the consumers of data themselves instead of it being an IT thing where they asked and IT delivered. We said, hey, we've set up this foundation. You know what you need more than we know, and we know that exploration and working with the data is one of the ways you're going to find things out. And so we democratized all that data. And we got into big data analytics that allowed us to have processing that occurred out in the cloud that did things that we never would have been able to afford with the on-premise equipment and the older technologies that were in use. So that is a good example of a strategy helping improve a lot of the things that happened in the data department at GameStop and ultimately help them improve their decision-making capability. And I talked a little bit earlier about understanding the value of a dollar. And GameStop, as many people know, is a company that has gone under many challenges. So data strategies aren't just for companies that are doing great and need to find a way to keep it going. A data strategy could be very useful for a company that is seeing a lot of contraction in their market and are trying to figure out what to do next. GameStop being a prime example. GameStop gets compared to Blockbuster a lot. Blockbuster is an example of not knowing what to do during that contraction to the point they were no longer viable. But data and the new modern data capabilities could allow GameStop to figure out different ways or different markets or different ways to approach the consumer that could save them. So data strategy is equally applicable through any stage of an organization's life cycle. So how would we get started if we wanted to really start with a data strategy? Well, there's a couple steps here. The first thing, and this is probably apparent from what we've discussed up to this point, you have to review business priorities. You have to know what the business is wanting to do to be able to have a data strategy that supports those priorities. You should establish a starting point. And what I mean by that is it may not be a great idea to just say, hey, let's start this data strategy program. And we're going to start talking about data strategy. There may be big initiatives going on in the organization and even initiatives around data where you could say, this is a great time for us to start talking about data strategy. If we are going to replace our ERP, for example, this may be a great time for us to start talking about data strategy so that you can get into those projects and influence things that happen as the data strategy is getting built. You should also think about your best practices within your organization. What are the things that are working the best, and how can those best practices be used to help support the data strategy, and how do we tie the strategy into those best practices? You're going to want to mobilize a task force. These will be evangelists for the data strategy, people working on the data strategy. And I broke this one out a little bit because I think this task force has a number of different tasks that it's going to be working on that I think are worth discussing. The task force is really there to examine all the data needs and how these needs might be sourced. It'll include things like looking at what technology exists in your organization and what technology might be needed. And they'll be there to help evaluate what data competencies already exist in your organization, because there are probably many data competencies in your organization today, and people and processes that are doing things. Nobody's not doing something with data today, so they exist in the organization, and you want to pull out the ones that are working the best and leverage those competencies where you can. And ultimately, you want to decide how all of this would be governed. Data governance is a big part of this, but that's really a topic for another webinar. We could talk a whole nother 35 minutes on data governance and beyond. So I'll save that for another webinar in my Data Makes the Difference series. And one last thing you could do is maybe get some outside help. One thing that we're offering at Cresco is a free workshop where we'll spend about 5 hours with a group of folks and talk about the different ways they could start formulating a data strategy, which will be inclusive of steps you can take, things that should be in the data strategy, components that you need to make sure are there, how you can leverage maybe the pieces and parts that already exist in your organization. So attending a Cresco web workshop or engaging us for a longer engagement to help with the data strategy is a great way. Look for outside help that can help you, people that have done this before and can help you determine what your data strategy should be and give you ways that you can implement it the best. Because the data strategy itself, like any strategy, is only as good as it starts to get instantiated in the organization through other tactical ways that a data strategy could manifest itself to the operational things that have to change to make sure it works. All of those things have to work, or a strategy really is just something to talk about. And that's it for this webinar. I have some more information here on how you could contact Cresco. As I mentioned, we have a free data workshop coming up on July 15th, and we'll restrict that to about 20 people. Really any more than that, it probably wouldn't be possible to have the workshop because it will be interactive. But here's some other ways you could contact us about other data needs that you might have. We're here to help. We have a lot of folks working here at Cresco that came from industry and have been on the other side, been the ones developing a data strategy and looking for help. So we feel we are very uniquely positioned to be able to help you. So let us know. I'll turn it back over to Jasmine to see if there are any questions and wrap up. So back to you, Jasmine.
If you have any questions, feel free to email us. If you're wanting to know more about how to implement data strategy into your organization, you can visit our website and we can help you out there. We just want to thank you so much for joining us for our webinar with Kenny. Kenny, thank you again. We really appreciate it.